last year, right?
No, I think it was Amsterdam in 2017.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, that's many years ago.
18? Well, one of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was when we actually met in person, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
For the first time.
I'm playing with the lights here because I feel like I'm blowing myself out. But if I turn that one off.
Okay. I think yes, I've started the stream.
Yep, the stream is stealthy. I see moving heads. I think just 3 of us right now.
Cool. That's good enough.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll start at 7-ish, I guess.
Oh, that's better.
My keyboard is really loud because I am like a green switch. Yes. Because I am evil. Oh, I think I should. Oh, I should share my screen already. Okay. How does this go? Share screen. Share. Aha. Oh, I should turn off flux. No, nightlight. Displays. Nightlight. Suddenly, everything is not orange anymore.
Yay.
Yay, 5 years old, party hat. I wonder if Chris will show up. Because it's late for him also.
He's what, 4 hours ahead of us?
Chris. Melbourne is 3 hours.
Melbourne's 3. It's almost 10 now.
Whoa.
Okay. 10
Oh, yeah. Well, Ed, are you in Melbourne or?
Yeah, I'm in Melbourne. Yeah.
Are you anywhere near Chris?
I'm not actually sure where Chris is living, but we are organising the next Melbourne CSS meetup group. If anyone wants.
Nice. Well, if he's not here, his head still pops up on the slides, regardless. He'll always be here in spirit.
Yeah.
The Chris script is my favorite. My favorite shenanigan. No, what's going on?
Does he still bake cookies for meetups in Australia?
Ed, does he bring cookies? No, does Sarah bake cookies for them?
We haven't had a physical meetup in such a long time that.
Oh yeah.
Are y'all still on lockdown though?
It's opened up a bit.
Okay.
But yeah, pretty soon we'll be able to go out to regional Victoria, at least, to go out to the country and finally get to see my folks again.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like per state, is it? Like it's not a nationwide thing.
It sort of ranges from state to state. But yeah, Melbourne's been in more of a lockdown.
Okay. The host has spotlighted your video for everybody. I could never get the hang of this host thing because I don't know where to do what. To my defense, right, my company doesn't use Zoom, we use Google Hangouts, just saying.
Okay.
I can hear Michael is like, yeah, okay. Not much of an excuse, Ken.
So atas.
It's not atas. It comes with the G Suite, what? Why would you use an extra tool?
Same as people who say, oh yeah, we use the team. Was that Microsoft Teams because they use Office 365,
Yeah, I guess so. So like, similar argument, same tone.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to remember to do my OBS thingy. OBS is an update. Well, too late for that now. Okay, start recording. Huh?
Do not update right before recording, please.
Yes, sir. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'm gonna start recording.
All right.
Okay, so hello everyone who is on the Zoom call. I don't know how many people are on the YouTube stream, but welcome to Talk.CSS number 56. It's our 5-year anniversary, 5th birthday. It's also our wind down edition. I'll probably talk a bit more like at the end of it. But so anyway, party hat time. So this is, it's been 5 years. I know some people are probably here for the first time, and there are some of you who have actually sat through our shenanigans for 5 years. So this is kind of nice. We have some social media presence. So we are at Singapore CSS on Twitter. You can use the hashtag Talk.CSS. I've said this for 5 years, but nobody actually uses the hashtag other than me. So we shall move on. Next. Oh my God, my next button is not working. Yeah, so our website has not changed in 5 years. I'm still hosted on GitHub because my operating budget is 0. singaporecss.github.io for a record of every single Talk.CSS ever. So, you know, for nostalgia reasons. We also have a code of conduct. Regardless of whether this is an online or in-person meetup, we do not tolerate harassment of participants in any form. I will invoke the power of Akong to kick you out of this Zoom meeting. We also have a full version of the COC on our GitHub. Of course, the shoutouts, we would not have any of these video things if it wasn't for engineers.sg, who has been with us since day one. So once again, we want to thank engineers.sg, as we have always done every month for 5 years. Without you, there will be much less of us. Of course, we also want to shout out Chion. For those of you who have never been to any of our meetups, Chion, surname Lim, he is the swag king of Singapore. If you have any questions about creating swag for your event, company event, meetup, whatever, he has the most comprehensive knowledge in this area. He also printed the very first batch of Singapore CSS stickers for us, so he will forever be immortalized in our shoutout slide. Meetups also have friends. So our sister meetup is Singapore JS, still going strong. They are usually the middle of the month, so check out their GitHub repository for details. Our best friend meetup is React Knowledgeable. They have also gone through a format change over the past couple of months. And so they will eventually come out of hiding and probably do a community event sometime in the future. So stay tuned for that. Host of the month, as it has been for the entirety of 2020, is the interwebs, brought to you by the internet. So this month's CSS color of the month is Rebecca Purple. And Rebecca Purple is the 148th color to be added to the CSS named colors list. It is a very, very special color, and it's also a very somber one. And I held off using it as our CSS color of the month for all these years because it never really felt right until now, especially because there is a link to our speaker this evening, Eric Meyer. I had been aware of the story behind this color from when it first came about back in 2014, because I was already like working on the web since then. And Jeffrey Zeltman wrote a blog post titled "The Color Purple." Eventually, I realized that not many people who were like, most people who weren't like extremely involved in CSS actually didn't really know the story behind this color. So I'm just gonna share the story behind Rebecca Purple. So Rebecca Allison Meyer had lost her fight against cancer 12 hours after her 6th birthday back in 2014. And to honor Eric Meyer's prolific work on CSS, it was proposed that the hex color 663399 be aliased to Becca Purple. Now, Eric Meyer only had one request if the proposal went through, and it was that the color be called Rebecca Purple instead. because Rebecca had told them that she was about to be a big girl of 6 years old, and Becca was a baby name. So once she turned 6, she wanted to be called Rebecca. And she made it to 6 years old. And so Rebecca it is, and Rebecca it must be. This proposal was approved on the 21st of June in 2014, and it was added to CSS color level 4. For those of you who are interested in where in the spec that it is. So yes, a very special color, and we also have a very esteemed special speaker who is closing off Talk.CSS with us tonight also. So the agenda is like as usual, has not changed. You all have to sit through me talking about HTML and CSS news of the month for about like 10-15 minutes. Then Eric will come on with his talk designing in the background, and we'll close off with Daniel. We'll talk about the is and where pseudo selectors. So let's move on to news. Haha, my personal favorite. Okay, I'm just going to assume you all can read the screen. Browser updates. Firefox is on a 4-week cycle, so it's 82 now. And let's see what's interesting. Okay, input type color now keyboard accessible. That's great. Let's talk about file selector button pseudo element. And so it represents the file selection button. If you're using input type file, that means you can target, and because it's a button, right? Like you can style it specifically to look different from the rest of your buttons if it's for file upload. So that's kind of nice. Just use this pseudo element. And is and where I'm gonna reserve for Daniel to talk about this. So this is like highly relevant. Like, thank you for cooperating with us, Firefox 82. I'm sure they did this on purpose. Never mind. Moving on. Safari Technology Preview is the I feel the underdog browser that I always like to shout out every time we talk about this, because they are on a, if I'm not wrong, 2-week release cycle. And how they do things is that everything that they push into Safari TP will eventually be installable as and when they push out the iOS updates. So if you want to try out the latest and greatest in CSS, I highly recommend downloading a copy of Safari TP. So now we are at 115. Let's see. Okay, math style property. I don't know if Murray is on the call today, but like if he watches this, anyway, shout out to Murray. Math style property is now shipped. So it's a property that indicates whether math ML equations should render with normal or compact height. Math ML is like the math markup language. So as far as I'm concerned, I think Murray will probably be the most interested in this. For the rest of you, like math. Never mind. Moving on. Flow relative shorthand and offset properties. This is in one of the links I have at the bottom. Flow relative shorthands is related to logical properties. So like instead of the top left, bottom right, we are doing like block start and inline start. So these are shorthands for like margins, padding, and border, etc. A few bug fixes. So that's for browsers. Specifications had some movement last month. So a bunch of specs got updated. As usual, I'm not going to tell you what was updated. I'm just going to tell you about the specs so that you can go and like find out more if you're interested. Properties and values has a spec. This is actually quite relevant for those of you who are interested in Houdini, because this is the API for registering new CSS properties. So the working draft got updated last month. Box sizing level 3 and 4 working drafts also got updated. So what's covered in this particular module is the sizing properties with keywords for the extrinsic and intrinsic sizings. Level 4 is just a delta spec. So that's pretty interesting for those of you who are complaining that like, you know, my layout keeps breaking at different widths. Well, CSS is developing more and more, how should we put this, dynamic ways for you to size your boxes. So stay tuned. Grid CR updated. So I don't think there's anything very majorly new. I think it's mostly fixes. FYI, level 2 is just adding subgrid to the main grid spec. What's interesting is that level 3 working draft is already around, and recently I think someone tweeted about it, so it got some publicity, so to speak. So of course, champion of CSS Grid, Rachel Andrew, wrote about it on Smashing Magazine. The gist of it, TLDR, is that level 3 is going to cover native masonry layout. So something pretty interesting. Custom highlight API module. I actually didn't know this existed until fairly recently. But it's a highlighting of I think selected text. Yeah. So that's something that's being worked on. If you have to style this during your work, like the future looks bright for you. Let's put it that way. Box model is its own thing now. I mean, it used to be part of the largest spec. Then they pulled it out and gave it its own module. So it's level 3. And this describes margin and padding properties. So that's what we have. Math functions seem to have been shipping in Blink and WebKit, I think. So these math functions, in addition to calc that I think is fairly common these days, there's min, max, and clam. Because I like to do responsive typography, my first use case is like, oh, I can do this like a responsive typography thing without having to write a fairly complicated SAS function. But what it does is like you can tell the browser like what's the minimum width you want, what's the maximum width you want. More math functions, I think, really will increase the ways that we can instruct how the browser wants to size your things. So this is a article that we can all go and check out. Lots of interesting articles this month. If you're subscribed to our newsletter, then I'll send it to your inbox. Otherwise, just come to our GitHub repository and click on all these links, man. And okay, cool code pen time. This is not a code pen per se, but like I'm a big fan of this let's call her a web developer designer. But she's known for doing CSS portraits. It might blow up my browser, so yeah. So I've featured her work like many times, Diana Smith. So this is just her latest work. This is CSS, my friends. So please check it out. Can I go close this before my browser explodes? And somehow the month of October, a lot of people are very inspired to build like CSS games. I think, I don't know, because there's also the Halloween theme, right? So there's a game called You Must Build a Lighthouse. Oh no, what did I just do? Sorry. Did I stop sharing the screen? Sorry. Zoom so difficult. Yeah, so this is You Must Build a Lighthouse. It's a game that is built with radio buttons. So you can see what it is. This is very, very cool. 100% CSS, no artificial colors or ingredients. So that was fun. This one also went slightly viral on the Twitters. And I also like the comment of JS. No. So yes, this is a pure CSS game. Very fun, very interesting. Do check it out. It's like one of those adventure games, so I really like this vibe. So that's it. That's it for me. I'm gonna hand over to Eric. So I'm stop sharing my screen now.
I should probably unmute before I say hello, shouldn't I? Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Good evening to Singapore and points around there. I'm glad to be with you. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the right button to share the right screen. Oh, hold on a second. You're going to get to see my PowerPoint setup for just a second here. But then I'll hit play. Okay. Can everyone see the slides okay? I just want to make sure.
Yep, looking great.
Okay, awesome. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today is using backgrounds. Basically, designing the background is, here's how we can use backgrounds to create some various interesting design effects, some of which might not be apparent at first glance as you mess with backgrounds. So let's get started with that. There we go. So I'm going to be using my personal website, meyerweb.com, as the example here, and this is kind of what it looks like. It's a local test copy, but it's so the information's a little old, but the design is basically the same. And almost all of the design elements that you're seeing are background images or background. Well, they're all background images or background colors. And I want to talk about a few of those. So I'm going to start with what is in some ways the most complicated of the backgrounds, but it's also in some ways the easiest stuff to understand, which is the background that I created for the body element. So this is what the site looks like, basically, without having modified anything. It has sort of this textured effect, this brush stroke look to it that was actually inspired by what I took some of these design elements from, which is a study of waveforms that was published in Japan in 1903 called Hamanchu, and I probably pronounced that incorrectly, and I apologize. But so like the waves at the top, which we'll be talking about in a little more detail here in a bit, those are taken from this published study of water forms, which is in the public domain and is available online. There's actually a link in the footer of almost every page on MeyerWeb to that if you want to see for yourself what the artist created. But anyway, so the body. If I take away the body background, I mean, this is what it looks like. And it's not a huge difference, right? Like there's no body background here other than sort of the browser standard white. And there's not a huge difference with what was there before, but I think there's difference enough. So the first step is also the last background layer, which is a solid color. And the thing about if you have a layered background, if you haven't messed with those before, you can only have one solid color. Like there's only one place you can say effectively you want a background color, like this particular HSL A color or red or Rebecca purple, whatever color you want to use. You can only have it as the last of the background layers, which puts it at the bottom. If you add anything to this, it has to be an image, which is what I'm about to do. And the first thing that I added above that background color is a tiled background image, which here I've shown in full opacity. So it's the same image that I created out of elements from Hamanchu, and then it's just tiled, but it has an offset. You might have noticed it's pushed over 250 pixels and then pulled upwards 50 pixels. That's where the origin image is placed, and then it tiles from there. And on top of that, I put the same image, but with no offset in its tiling. So why did I do two copies of the same image but tiled with different offsets? Because when they're combined, you get this. It's almost a complete background cover. There are bits where gaps show through, but what interested me when I did this was that this created a pattern that almost didn't feel like a pattern. And to the extent that it does feel like a pattern, I was willing to live with that because it's going to be a body background. And also, it's not going to be nearly this obvious in the final design. And if you've noticed, there's sort of a little glow behind the navigation links on the side. That's actually caused by a radial background image gradient on that particular nav links element. Not going to have time to explore it today, unfortunately, but that's where that glow comes from as a radial gradient in the background of that. I think it's a UL element, might be a nav element. I don't remember now. Sorry, I should have put that in my notes. As Huijin would say. Moving on. But down at the bottom of the page, I've skipped down here to where the footer is. I really felt like there needed to be a visual transition leading to the footer, rather than have this pattern like come right up to sort of this gray area that the footer has and then stopping. So did that by having an upward pointing linear gradient, which basically, I mean, it starts at the bottom and then it has a solid color, HSLA 34 degrees, 38% saturation, 99% lightness, and full opacity. That starts at 23M, and then it fades out to 0 over almost the next 20M. Now, the size of this is based on the footer size. The footer, because I know what's going to go in it, sort of has a given size, but also some experimentation. I didn't start out saying, doing math in my head and saying, oh, this will be exactly 23M and it will go to exactly 42M, right? Like I played with the numbers a little bit and said, how does this look? How does 22M look? How does 400 pixels look? And so on and so forth. I wanted it to be text size, so I was going to use M's or Rems. I ended up using M's. But, I probably started with 20M and then moved it upwards and then maybe scooched it back a little bit. That's where, a lot of this stuff ended up. You're going to see other values in here that I might not mention. You might think to yourself, why did he pick that exact number? Because it looked good. It looked right after I experimented for a while. Anyway, I used a similar approach up in the masthead where, or at least behind the masthead at the top of the body background, where I have a gradient that's coming downwards. But notice it's not quite exactly downward pointing. It actually points at 179 degrees instead of the exactly downward 180 degrees. I'm going to change it so that it isn't 179 degrees. This is what it looks like when it's 180 degrees. And if you look, there's a difference, right? That it goes kind of right along that curl of the wave that sticks out and then goes underneath the meyerweb.com as though it's almost like a baseline. But if we go back to 179 degrees, right, that it moves up in the MeyerWeb so that the fade out transition goes behind the text a little bit, and it doesn't go right exactly along that sweep of the wave. Creates a more organic feel, which is what I was after. I didn't want the sort of sterile feel of having the exact 180. Going to 179 felt right. I think 178 I tried and it was a little too much, and I could have done, what about 179.1 degrees, 178.9 degrees? All right, at a certain point, I got tired of experimenting. I stuck with 179 degrees. But, you can use fractional degrees, and maybe with a slightly different application of this. If I'd been using a different font for meyerweb.com, let's say, and that is text, by the way, it's using a font called IMFEL, which I love. But if I were using a different font, if I were using Helvetica, 179 degrees might not look right. Maybe it would need to be 179.25 degrees or 178.5 degrees, something like that. So that's, something to keep in mind as well. Anyway, now, above all those other gradients that I've talked about, is this one, which is too complicated to show here. That's what the dots mean. It's actually a very long gradient syntax. I'll show it in an upcoming slide, but it's just too complicated to show here. But it's also very subtle. It might not be easy to tell, but there are these sort of shadows at the sides, and then it fades in. So I'm going to change the colors. I'm going to change the lightness. Actually, literally, I just changed the lightness of the HSL colors, and that's what that looks like. It goes from a shade to semi-transparent to fully opaque in the center, and then back to semi-transparent and back to another shade. So here it is again as normal, but it gives us this little bit of shadowing along the sides, and mostly knocks out that background tiled repeat behind the text column, the main column of the page. And then I put in one last top gradient to shade the masthead a little more. This was an early color choice. This was actually one of my original design thoughts that I ended up lightening a lot so that it actually looks like this. This is the end result where it shades in. But if you look at the top left and right corners, there's a little extra shading almost, because that's where those side shades and the top shade kind of combine. And it makes it a little more paper-like in feel, which is really what I was after. So, like I say, that's the end result. Now, that was a lot of layers to throw into one background, and if you're trying to keep track of where they were in your head, well, let me go through them again. So let's go through those layers. First, we have the color, the background color, and then the two tiled images. And then on top of those are the bottom and top gradients of the page, and then that main side to side ingredient, and then that last little bit of top shading. And that's it. If that was difficult to visualize, maybe you'd prefer it in 3D. So here's how they stack up. And yes, both this slide and the previous slide are HTML and CSS animations. And here's the code. I mean, it looks complex, but honestly, most of that is in the gradient syntax. The gradient syntax can be daunting, but it's pretty compact for a text description of images. And yes, I just want to make the point, gradients are images every bit as much as SVGs or PNGs are images. They're just described in this way. I will admit, I hand wrote these. I don't expect people to do that. There are plenty of gradient generators on the web that let you play around with color stops and easing and all that sort of thing, which is great, but I'm just one of those people who hand authors things like linear gradients and simple SVGs, so what can you do? At any rate, I want to talk about other parts of the page besides just the body, like those waves across the footer. Actually, I played around with these for a while. So here's the footer, the way it looks normally. And here's the element box of the footer. And you might think to yourself, oh, okay, he's going to set a huge top padding and put his backgrounds in there. And I thought about doing that. But instead, I ended up using a before pseudo element attached to the footer because I wanted there to be a distinction between the actual body of the footer, which is where you see that the gray gradient that leads down to the very bottom of the footer, and the waves on top. And, you know, that was just how I chose to do it this time. So let's take away the before's background, which is what I've done here, that before pseudo element. And then first at the bottom is I put in another subtle shading gradient. I was really into sort of these shading gradients when I was creating this design. I might go back and simplify some of them at this point, but that's how I did it. But it kind of creates a little bit of a shading towards the top of the footer's main body. And then I repeated an image along the x-axis. This is one image that just I did the work to blend it in Photoshop, well, Acorn in my case, and then repeated it along the x-axis. And you can see there's a strip where the image, the bottom of that background image, doesn't quite reach the bottom of the background area because it's positioned so that it's 0, 95%. So it's 95% of the way down, and then it's 1.5 m tall, an auto-sized width, and then it repeats X. But there's this strip, but that's okay because I'm going to do another row of exactly the same image, just slightly bigger. That's actually up against the bottom that covers up that gap, right? So this is, if you look at the code, the same footer wave.png file that's repeated along the x-axis. It's just the row in the back is a little smaller than the row on the front. And using that same image at different sizes, again, created sort of like with the body background, created this pattern that looks almost random and organic, and yet is not, right? It's actually very repeatable, but it repeats over very long distances. And again, you know, the heights of 2M and 1.5 m and the positioning of 95%, all arrived at by experimentation, really. There were bits that I set up where the repetition looked really robotic, looked really very regular, and wasn't what I was after. And then other ones where like you couldn't see the back row. So that's where that experimentation comes in. And then I ended up adding a single large wave image on the left side because why not? It just seemed like the thing to do. Oops. And this is what the code looks like, including the sizing of that before element. I had to, and the display of it, had to set it to display block and give it a height, in this case, 6.5 m. And then I also have a mixed blend mode of darken on it. That would let other things show through the footer's waves if placed there, but it's really not necessary for the design as it is now. I was experimenting, and I should probably pull that out, but it's in the code, so I thought I'd show it to you. So some of those techniques get applied in different ways to the header. And this is the header with its element box highlighted. Now, I didn't use the before or after pseudo elements on this particular element. I just styled the background of the element itself, because I wasn't making that distinction like I was with the footer, where the footer has this very visual difference between itself and the rest of the document, the rest of the page. And so I wanted the footer to have that, and then I could use the before pseudo element to put in the waves. Here, I actually want the header element to blend with the overall page, so I didn't need to really use pseudo elements. I just styled the background of the element itself. So if you take away the backgrounds, this is what we have, which is, it's a lot of white space, but you know, it works okay. If the images fail to load for some reason, this is not terrible. So then I add in the first, which is pulled a little bit off screen to the left, and then it has a vertical placement using a calc statement, as you can see there. It's meant to lift the image up from the bottom of the header by a distance dictated by the width of the browser window. It's basically put your bottom edge against the bottom, but then come upwards by 4.2% of the width of the browser window. Again, that 4.2% mostly arrived at by trial and error. It's also 29% the width of the overall header element. And then its height is auto calculated so that it keeps its aspect ratio. So then on the right, put a different wave image pinned to the bottom right and 45% of the width of the header. And then another copy of that left side wave, but bigger, pinned to the bottom left, and also 45% the width of the header. So on the left side, that's actually two copies of the same image, right? There's a smaller one in the back, and then a bigger one closer up. And there's that 10% of the header that's clear of either wave. I wanted it split like that. And I also, to some extent, I wanted it split so that I could, if I wanted to, set widths that weren't percentage based. And then if the browser window got really wide, the waves would pull apart. Anyway. So now I've inserted a translucent gradient into the middle of that background stack. And notice that the smaller wave on the left, the one in the back, is faded out, right? Here's that same gradient made more opaque. And it actually shows how the foreground wave masks out the background wave. Let me pull that left wave out and then give it a black background. So you can see some parts of the images are opaque, some parts are not. That's the beauty of PNGs. But you put that on top of the other wave, and then you put the light gradient between them, and you get the illusion of depth, which I really liked. That was something I was after. Maybe I was a little too aggressive with the fading of that back wave. Maybe I should lighten the gradient or make it more transparent so that the wave in the background isn't quite as faded out. But that's really easy to do. I just have to adjust a couple of HSLA colors, and specifically just their alpha channels, which is what I like about this overall technique of layering images and layering gradients. It's much simpler to experiment with and alter various effects just by changing a few lines of CSS, or maybe just one line of CSS. So there's more to this header than I showed actually. This is the basic background setup, which is applied to mobile sizes. I styled mostly mobile first, right? So it just has that left-hand wave at mobile sizes. But then when you go up to the desktop sizes, you get, or even really large handheld sizes, you get this layered background that I was just talking about, and just showing you with that sort of illusion of depth. You know, and if I ever decided that I wanted to put in the middle between the two waves a boat, all I have to do is add an image, right? Or if I decide I want to create even more depth and more repetitions of these wave images, again, all it takes is adding in a couple lines of this background rather than having to like redo the whole thing. Backgrounds, though, don't have to be this complicated. And I kind of threw you into the deep end, not to use a nautical pun, by going through the most complicated ones first. But sometimes with just a line or two, you can create a more stylish separator. So as an example, the line there that's between the main body of a post and the sort of the meta information saying when it was published and what categories it's in. That's a background image. And it's a background gradient, which again is a background image. The way it works is I created some top margin and top padding. The padding is the important part here. There's an M.5 of top padding. You may have noticed I like to do in situations like this a lot of my sizing in M so that it's text based on the text size. Anyway, I put in a single background. This is it as a 5 pixel tall background gradient. So you can see it actually starts more darker, more opaque on the sides, and then becomes lighter in the center. It fades in towards the center. Just by using different RGBA values, different A values on RGBA. And you can see it's not repeated. It's 50%. It's basically centered vertically, or excuse me, centered horizontally and pushed down 1em vertically. And then it's 100% wide and 5 pixels tall. But if we change that 5 pixel to 1 pixel, here it is. And that's it, right? Rather than using an HR or having a PNG or an SVG that I have to load, or in the case of an SVG embed, I literally just have one line of CSS. And if I ever decide that I want to make it darker or lighter, I just fiddle with a few alpha colors. If I ever decide that I want to turn it into a rainbow, I just change the color stops. That's really all it takes. Now, we can take this and sort of combine all of these various ideas to make separators fancy as opposed to simple, and they don't really involve that much more code, only a few more lines. So this separator, this is based on an HR element. It literally is an HR element, and I'm showing it here without any extra styles, right? There's literally an HR in the markup, which is something I use occasionally in my markup. But an HR element is an element. You can style it, and CSS does not care what you think an HR is supposed to look like. You can do whatever you want, right? You can size it, you can add margins, right? So here I've added some margins to it and also gave it a height of 2.33 em. So now it's a box, because an HR is really a 0 height box with some borders. So if I take away those borders, the HR becomes invisible until I add a background to it. In this case, I have a 1 pixel gradient that fades towards the sides. It's actually more opaque in the center than it is at the side. So it's sort of the reverse of what I did with the other separator. And then I can add on top of that a 3 pixel thick gradient, which fades out more quickly, but it creates this effect of the gradient getting thicker towards the center, right? So not only does it fade out visually, but it also fades out in terms of thickness is the visual effect that's created here. Then add a couple of images, similar to the way that the left and right waves were added to the header. And then one more in the middle. And now any HR element that catches these styles will be extra fancy, right? Create a little more visual punch. And you can do all kinds of things. I wanted this to be centered. At one point, I was putting the trumpets, as I call them, the two things on the sides of that disk. I was putting them on the ends, so that there was a disc in the middle and then this line that went out and then had these trumpets on the end. And I liked this better, but who knows? Maybe someday I'll just reposition those trumpets and have that effect instead. And anyway, here's the code, which I realized as I was formatting the slide could be a bit simpler. You might notice every background image here, every single one of them is set to no repeat. I'm repeating myself, right? Every time, no repeat, no repeat, no repeat, no repeat. I could take all of those out and add a single line of CSS to cover all of those repeats by just pulling them out and then having a single background repeat, no repeat, which will apply to all of them. So, they're all, like I said, there are a lot of different ways to combine these things. In block quotes, here's another way of combining images and gradient lines, which is what I did for the block quote here. There's one image in the top left, and then there's another one in the bottom right, and then a gradient line across the top that looks like the quote image has some kind of halo around it. That's actually a visual trick. It's the gradient fading out before it reaches that quote image. Same thing on the bottom, right? It does that same fade out trick that makes it look like I did some kind of fancy filter or something on the quotes but they're really PNGs that don't have fancy glows. I'm just faking it. And what I like about this technique is that if those quote images fail to load for some reason, like maybe the image directory gets moved somehow, it's still an interesting looking style. It still sets this apart visually from the rest of the text. It's missing a little extra decoration. But anyway, here's the code. And for the linear gradients, the two stripes at the top and bottom, I used current color, which is a keyword that basically says, what's the current color of this image, right? So whatever the text color is, that's what those gradients are going to use. We're used to borders taking that sort of thing automatically, but these aren't borders, they're gradients. And I have to give them a color. But here I can say, whatever color the text is, use that. That's, use the current color. So that if I have a block quote that I decide to style red, those two lines will get shaded red, although the quote images won't. I think that's okay. And if I really thought that they needed to be changed, I could probably come up with ways to make that happen. So one more, I promise, and then it'll be time. So sometimes you can use backgrounds as masks. We saw this a little bit with a header image with a one wave that has some opaque bits. So for these links, these extra special links that let you into a new place, I decided to go with this presentation. And if I take off the background images and just leave a background color, it's very subtle here. It'll be more obvious in just a minute. You can see that there are these rounded caps on the ends of the link, which I create with border radius. That'll be on the code in just a minute. But anyway, once that's done, I put in top and bottom gradients. And these are just, I think, the gradients that literally go from black to black, or some black shade to the same black shade, creating what would otherwise be borders. But here, I didn't want to set borders and then have them curl onto the sides. I just wanted the top and bottom stripes that would get cut off by the border rounding. So gradients made sense. And then added a couple of images, very similar to the fancy horizontal rule or to the header, where there's one on the left and one on the right. This is actually the two images which I put next to each other. But if I split them apart and bring in a background color, you can see that they're actually sort of negative space. And they have this light mask almost. The opaque parts of them create a mask. So when I put them back on here, they mask out the background, that red background. But they also, you can see some of the body's background, if you look closely, through the part where the images should be, right? Where that opaque mask was. And that's because I'm using the border radius to sort of cut them off. I just inverted. I used filter invert to invert the link, so you can see where things are masked, and it all comes together. It's not perfect. I considered using actual masks, but the support for masking images wasn't great at the point I was doing this, and I'm not sure it's gotten much better. Whereas this is very, very widely supported. Anyway, here's the code. You've got the right end cap and the left end cap, and they don't repeat, and a couple of gradients. Okay, they don't go to exactly the same colors, but they're very close. And then underneath all of that is that faint red color, which is FED. Then 5 is the alpha, so that expands out to FFEEDD55, 55 representing the alpha value for this particular color. And then there's that border radius. It's 1M wide, and then 50% of the link height. There's a great deal more I could say that I could talk about when it comes to backgrounds. I mean, honestly, to some extent, I only scratched the surface here. I didn't get to radial gradients, for example, which you can do very interesting things with. But I think I've probably gone on more than long enough. It's been about half an hour. I'd just like to say I'm very honored that you would have an Ongmo like me come to share some of his knowledge with you. And I want to close by offering my deepest respect to the organizers of Singapore CSS for all that they've done over the last 5 years. Any meetup is difficult to sustain. 5 years is a long time. So, heartfelt congratulations, thanks and respect to all of the organizers of Singapore CSS. And thank you all for joining me today. I hope it was interesting, and I hope you had as much fun as I did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for such a great talk. I don't know what the others think, but for me personally, when you unveiled this design of your site, I was like, how did he do it? And now that you've spoken about it, it's really nice to see how it was done. Hopefully, it can inspire other people to pursue these sort of like relatively more interesting and artistic designs, as opposed to going the minimalistic route, which is, it's great, but kind of boring. And so I asked for questions, but in general, folks around here don't really ask questions. I only had one question that wasn't very relevant to the actual talk, but Ed has asked, do you have a reset.css for 2020?
If I had one, it would basically be the current version, except it does need a couple of images added to it. A couple of elements added to it, not images, elements. I think it's missing main, for example. And it is something I should probably reevaluate. What I find interesting is that there are a lot of what I think of as reboots houses. So normalize.css is an example of this, where it's not just a reset. The idea of the reset was to strip away all of the what we think of as no styles, but there's a lot of no styles, and then build on that. So the idea was that you would take the reset and then modify it so that it started from the point that you like. Had your favorite body font and your favorite heading fonts and your favorite color combinations, which is what normalize.css is for the creator of normalize.css. And a lot of people love it. Nothing wrong with that. I've seen others as well. The names are escaping me. But I would say, anyone who's thinking of using the reset.css, grab it, modify it as you need, and then keep that as sort of your launching off point. And then over time you can modify it. One of the weirdest things about reset.css is that it just got used in WordPress themes. Like the default WordPress themes for many years just had it verbatim. They didn't edit it. They just put it in and then overwrote it. Well, and then overwrote it, right? So that instead of altering, some of the basics, they would just override them later. And so a lot of people assumed that's how it was supposed to be used. That was never actually the vision I had for it. But, as William Gibson once said, the street finds its own uses for things. So, there you go.
That's cool. That's a cool bit of trivia as well. And okay, so people being shy, I've also said that they could, I guess, ping you on Twitter if they suddenly think of some random question that they'd like to ask you. You'll be sharing the slides with us, right?
Yes, I can. We'll figure out the best way to make that happen.
No problem. Well, thank you once again, Eric, for being with us this evening, and for showing up at such a Singapore-friendly time. Everyone's really excited that you are speaking this evening, and yeah, thanks for a great talk. So
thank you for having me. It was an honor.
We are equally honored to have you. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to our second speaker of the night, Daniel. And let's see how this works. I'm going to. Right. So, Daniel, you'll have to share your screen when you're ready. No worries. Take your time. yeah, I'll start recording when you're on. And
Yeah, give me just a couple of minutes.
no problem.
Not a couple of minutes, but like, yeah, give me some time.
Yeah, it's okay.
But
What?
you be hanging around, right, Eric?
Yes, I will.
Okay, I can fill time by telling people fun facts about Daniel. He used to be a Microsoft MVP, and he's actually a very quiet CSS expert. So like you all don't know, so I'm telling you all. Yes. So it's also really
Thank you.
cool that he has come out to share with us on this final Talk.CSS. I'm really closing off with a bang with my like biggest speakers, so this is nice. Yes, I'm feeling for time. What else can I say? What's exciting happening in the world of CSS? Because there are a lot of exciting things happening in the world right now. But like let's keep it to CSS.
Why don't you just say hi to Chris? I think he's in the call.
Is Chris here, Mr. Leonard? Can you show your face?
I'm in the dark.
Yes.
Hello. Can we pin
Hello.
him? Can we pin him to the? Okay, I'm just gonna start this recording. Hello. For those of you who are not aware of Singapore CSS, Chris is the original founder of Talk.CSS. Came up with this harebrained scheme together with me, and we have Talk.CSS because of Chris. Chris calling in all the way from Melbourne. Do you want to say a few words?
I can't believe it's 5 years. It's frightening.
It's 5 years. It's like if we measure Talk.CSS against the height of Elijah, that would be fun, right?
He'd be taller because he's too big.
He's way taller now. Like the last
Yeah.
time I saw him, right?
But it's funny, we set this up with absolutely no plans of how anything would happen.
Exactly.
The fact that it's gone to anyhow 5 years is pretty impressive.
I know, right? I mean, I don't know what we'll do in the future. It's just, I guess, this format, I think, is getting a bit stale, right? And then the fact that you're not here to give me like better ideas, Mr. Leonard, I still like, you left me to go home. Why? But yeah, I'm running out of ideas lah, honestly. So that's pretty much.
Well, if people get bored, there's always Melbourne CSS. We're on an earlier time zone, but you know.
Right. Yeah. So yes, you all can still tune into Melbourne CSS because it's like Melbourne, Singapore, Melbourne. Like, what's the difference, right? Honestly.
We can't do anything physically at the moment anywhere, so you know, doesn't make much
Oh.
difference.
Yeah, also true. Are you having a next Melbourne CSS? Because you're doing it like quarterly or bi-month.
It's meant to be every 2 months, but this year has just been difficult. Next one's on the 25th, but I haven't actually done anything yet because I'm lazy.
That sounds familiar. Like, yeah,
I've
it's very
carried everything
heartwarming to
from
hear that
Singapore
you're exactly the
CSS,
same as us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still looking for speakers.
I see what you did there, Ed. Good club. Okay, Daniel, anytime you can just share your screen and we are good.
Take away from us because we're
just talking nonsense.
Dead
Like,
air.
what's new?
Okay,
Here we go.
Okay, give me a moment. I guess I could spend the next few seconds taking in this title screen.
Yes, it's a very beautiful and artistic and galactic title screen. Amazing.
Yeah, I made it actually. How
So,
do I
like,
collapse? Okay.
the secret theme for today, everybody, is artistic. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Daniel. So hope you're all having a great evening, and As for Eric, well, I'm sure yesterday has been a hell of a day for him, and this morning, and well, I hope he's had a good rest, and I enjoy his talk too. I remember the first time he unveiled his website redesign, and just as everyone else, I was pretty impressed. And I remember him publishing a post about how he did the background effects as well. So that was something good to learn from. And well, I should have known that he would use it as a topic for today. So, but just to be clear, I'm not speaking today specifically because of Eric, but I mean, we all know that he's one of the big shots in CSS, and yeah, he's very well respected and all, but I'm not here just for the cloud. I'm not just here to ride on his coattails. The real reason I'm here is because as Hui Qing said, is the last Talk.CSS, and I've been attending this meetup for a couple of years now, and as I see here, I have a speech disability, so I started out not really saying a word, and over time, as I got more comfortable, I started speaking to people, and that inspired me to think, maybe I could give this a try. Maybe I could give speaking a try, and Talk.CSS seems like a good place to start because it's a small community, it's a local community, and it's CSS. It's one of my favorite things. So my only problem is I wasn't expecting the meetup to be the last meetup ever, and I'm still kind of bummed out about it. Then when I first heard the news last week, I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. I'm gonna give a talk. And I kind of scrambled to find a topic, but I think I finally found one. So in this talk, I'll be introducing the new is and where CSS selectors, and these okay, so let me introduce myself a little bit first. Yeah, so my name is Daniel. These are my pronouns, they, them, in case you want to tweet about me. They, them, or he, him is fine, I'm okay with either. So I was born and raised Singaporean, but my Singlish CMI lah. CMI stands for cannot make it, I mean, yeah, I did grow up in Singapore, but my Singlish is not so great, so I'm just gonna speak the way I normally do. So I got my start on the web learning HTML, and I learned it from Neopets, and I was just 8 years old. So even back then, they had this small little section where you could read it, where they had a tutorial that will walk you through the basics of HTML, like the paragraphs, formatting, lists, that kind of stuff, and you could customize pages for your Neopets. And that's where a lot of people my age started to explore our creativity. So I think some of you here who are around my age range, I'm actually 28 now, so it's kind of weird to think that I've known HTML for 20 years. So a number of you probably grew up around my time as well, so probably remember Neopets, and some of you might have gotten your start on there as well. But I actually went with just HTML for about 6 years. I wasn't actively making my own website for all 6 years, but it was only 6 years later that I started to take CSS seriously, because I remember at the time when I first saw CSS, I was pretty daunted at having to learn a second language. So at 14 years old, when I did the first redesign of my site, I picked up CSS. So fast forward a few years later, I've been making, I haven't actually been doing this professionally. I've been doing it as a hobby all this time. And I didn't really dive deep into CSS and web development until a couple of years later when I was in college. And then I started getting active on Stack Overflow. And I found my niche. I realized that CSS was my forte, and I realized that I really enjoyed following the development of CSS and HTML and the web platform. And I really enjoyed explaining it to other developers as well. So answering their questions, getting reputation, and somehow I found myself pretty much leading these technologies on the site. So many of you who use Stack Overflow chances are you've probably come across a couple of my answers on the site. So, and I'm pretty proud of the impact that I've had. I'm pretty proud, and at the same time humbled by it. And I'm a moderator there, and Samuel, who's been attending Talk.CSS quite regularly as well, he's another of the moderators. Yeah, and I believe John, Clemens, and Rob should be in the audience as well. Hi. Yeah, and oh my, I forgot. Okay, never mind. I got a couple more shout-outs actually, but I'll wait until the end of the talk to do that. So my contributions on Stack Overflow, along with the stuff that I've been coding on the side, didn't go unnoticed by Microsoft. So as Hui Jing mentioned, I was a Microsoft MVP, and I was given the award in recognition of my contributions. So I was an MVP for 3 years, and even prior to that, I have been working closely with the Microsoft Edge team as well, with the IE and Microsoft Edge team, to improve the web platform, to improve their implementation, as well as to improve web standards for everyone. And I actually really support Microsoft on this front, because they used to be, they used to have this monopoly with Internet Explorer, but they've since changed their ways, and they're really embracing open source and the open web. And I started attending Talk.CSS in 2018. Yeah. So like Hui Jing, I love reading CSS specifications. They're not the most reader-friendly thing in the world, but personally, I really like understanding all the underlying theory of how CSS works, from syntax to error handling to box model to media queries and all the mechanical stuff, as well as all the little edge cases of layout and all that. So a lot of my activity on Stack Overflow is mostly pertains to explaining the spec for others to understand how things work. So just a few of my favorite specs. I hope this is not too visually much, but syntax, where all the parsing and reading of tokenization and stuff. Conditional rules, which ties into another one. So there's media queries and supports feature queries. There's the really brand new nesting module that's derived from preprocessors. There's the cascade, because I find that, to be honest, a lot of developers, they misunderstand the cascade. They kind of hate the cascade. They think that it really works against them, when really I believe that the cascade is your friend, not your enemy. But that'll be for another time. And sorry to Flexbox users, I prefer Grid. Of course, I know that these are two different layout modes that have their own different users, and you can even combine them together. You know, there's nothing stopping you from combining them. But I personally just prefer grids. So the next tier will be, you know, color, as Huiting mentioned. As Huiting mentioned, the color of the month is Rebecca Purple, and that's really, really significant, really meaningful color. And, you know, actually, I do use Rebecca Purple in my site. In fact, I think I don't remember if I have any Rebecca Purple items in this presentation. We'll probably get to that. But I do use Rebecca Purple for things like highlighting on my website. Not just because of Eric, but not just because of Rebecca, but because purple is my favorite color. Yeah. And there's media queries, there's custom properties, CSS variables, and pseudo elements. And of course, my specialty is in CSS selectors. I mean, they're pretty simple. They just say, which of these elements in the page do I want to select? What do I want to do with them? But there are a lot of different techniques you can use to match elements, applying a variety of conditions. And even though right now CSS3 selectors, they are not as powerful as they can be in selectors 4, there's still quite a fair bit you can do with them, even if you get into CSS hex territory. So let's talk about CSS selectors. So if you've been following CSS news, you've probably heard of the recent is and where pseudo classes. So these are part of selectors level 4, the latest working draft. But these selectors aren't as new as you might think. So a little bit of a history lesson. These selectors have been wanted by developers for many years, because everyone hates repeating selectors, because you have to, we'll get to an example later, but it's a problem that's faced by pretty much every CSS user for years and years. So somebody proposed a syntax that was friendly to the existing selector syntax in the form of a pseudo class called any. So this was back in 2008, and in the next couple of years, there will be some vendor-specific implementations by Mozilla and by WebKit. So these came in prefixes, and they were used in their internal user agent style sheets. But because of the prefixes, you can't use them in production, because you have to use both prefixes, and that would mean repeating everything, and that would, you know, defeat the purpose altogether. So that's why you never see any in the wild. But later that year, the first public working Java selectors for came out, and it showed up as matches. So the definition was mostly the same. So it's a single pseudo class that matches one element, but it will match the element if it satisfies any of these conditions. So if you put it next to like a type selector, you didn't have to repeat that type selector as many times as there were other alternatives. And this was unprefixed in Safari 9 back in 2015. So 2015, that was 5 years ago. And Safari has had a number of selectors for features for 5 years. And things have been moving really slowly since, but things have been ramping up in recent years, when in 2018, it was redefined as is and where. So why two selectors separately? We'll get to that soon. And is and where finally landed in Firefox 78 and Safari 14. So Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome have implementations as well in Blink. But according to MDN, there's a little bit of buggy behavior, so it's still under the experimental flags right now. So you can't quite use it in production yet, but they're getting there, and that's exciting for us developers. So what are these two selectors for? Put simply, when we have multiple selectors, especially when they get pretty long, some portions need to be repeated multiple times to cover all bases. So like the div example I mentioned, or in this case, here's one of the examples. So let's say we have some heading elements, and we have headings of different levels, and each one of them has an ID. So you can use the ID to navigate to each section on the page using the URL fragment. And to highlight, for example, highlight the heading text and color it differently, we can use the target pseudo class. So if we want to apply the same style to all 4 of these types of headings, we have to say H1 target, H2 target, H3 target, and H4 target. And you got to repeat the target 4 times. And that's kind of clunky. It works, but it's clunky. But then when we consider something like a table, for example, if we have a table that has zebra striping, we want not only zebra striping of rows, but zebra striping of row groups. So each row group is represented by a separate T-body element. And we want to apply a background color to the table heading and the table cell. So that's represented by the TH and TD elements. So when we want to apply zebra striping to every odd T-body, we can see that we have to repeat this condition once for the TH and another time for the TD. And because we don't want to mess up nesting tables, we can't use a single space as a descendant selector between the T-body and the cell. We have to chain it with a TR, and that makes it even longer. So is and where allow us to reduce the number of times we write certain selectors. It allows us to eliminate this repetition. So for example, with the headings, you can see here that we only need to write target once. And then we use the is pseudo class, and in the is pseudo class between the brackets we specify the 4 different headings. So we attach a single is pseudo class to the target. You only need to use it once, and it's all just one line. And this is much easier to read as well. And because these 2 pseudo classes are simple selectors, you can arrange them in any order. Type selectors notwithstanding, but yeah, you can arrange them in any order. You could put the target after the is, but I kind of like how it says target is H1, H2, H3, H4. As for the table example, here you can see that our TH and TD are consolidated into the is pseudo class. So with one is pseudo class, we only need to change this to one T-body TR is either THTD. And same with the zebra stripe with the n child odd. So this really simplifies our table cell rules. So why do we have 2 pseudo classes? Why do we have an is and why do I have a where? Well, the difference is specificity. With the is pseudo class, specificity rules apply normally, with the exception that the is itself does not count. Because if the is pseudo class counted, then it would not actually be a proper expansion of that. So if you look here, for example, if you had a preprocessor that had a hypothetical is pseudo class, what you would do is you might expand this into these 4 rules for use in current versions of browsers. And I believe the naive implementation of that in browsers themselves, it might look something like that as well. But of course, we don't know the full inner workings, the optimizations that they might have. But that's how you might think of it in theory. So if the is pseudo class counted, then this expansion wouldn't work because you will have to factor in for the specificity. So to counteract that, it doesn't count. So with this div example, we want a div that is either of this class or this ID, or it can be both. But we have to satisfy at least one of these conditions to apply the styles. So the specificity is one ID for the bar, one class for the foo, and one type selector for the div. As for the where pseudo class, the where pseudo class has no specificity, so it's always 0. That means with our example here, if we change the is to where div where full bar, the specificity is only the div type selector. And this makes overriding arbitrary selectors easier. For example, if we have a series of list styles with a link, a visited, a hover, a active, and let's say we want to apply a different style to navigation links. So you might say something like nav a. I'm sorry that I don't have a code example for this, but you can imagine that nav a has less specificity because it doesn't have a pseudo class, so it would not be able to override that. So using where with the links to the classes makes this easier to override. But I do have a more clinical example, but this example actually demonstrates what exactly happens when you use either of these pseudo classes. So in everyday use, you might use the cascade. You might just use the cascade as normal. You might say color all paragraphs red, and after that say I want full and bar to be blue. You might place the p full and p bar at the bottom, so then that later rule will override the p, and because it's more specific as well. So with the is actually a poor example because of the more specific selectors, but with the where you can see that even though I added these two class selectors, it's still being overridden by the general rule because these two classes don't count for specificity. So as a result, these two rules have equal specificity and the later overrides the former. But what are the benefits of having these two pseudo classes anyway? So, I mean, besides repetition, what's the benefit of eliminating this repetition? Why can't we just continue with our own way and continue what we've been doing for years and years and years? And why can we just continue to get frustrated and all that? Well, we've taken to using stylistic preprocessors such as SAS, and one of the most common features of preprocessors is to nest rules to reduce this selected repetition. And even nesting is being defined in another CSS spec, which I actually blogged about a few months back. Yeah. So is and where, not only do they reduce this selected repetition like nesting rules does, but they also eliminate that nesting itself. For example, if we had this P full bar, or even the H1, H2, H3, H4 target, you might have a target rule and then a nested rule with all the heading elements, but that's like additional curly braces, additional indentation. It's just not necessary. So we can consolidate all that down into just an extra selector. And this improves readability and maintainability. So as you can, because you are able to see this is and where and say, oh, we are looking for an element that matches any of these conditions. So a note on error handling, I was gonna cover this, but yeah. So in a CSS rule, in a normal CSS style rule, the normal thing that happens is when you have a list of comma separated selectors, if any one of them is invalid or unsupported by your older browser, the whole rule becomes invalid. So developers exploited this behavior to create CSS hacks. So for example, some of the famous Internet Explorer hacks, for example, HTML greater than body, something. This was to hide rules from IE6, which didn't support the child combinator greater than sign. And this worked very well even if you had like longer selector lists, because you just needed to use that hack once and we invalidate the whole rule and hide it from IE6. But the problem is that this behavior can work against us when we are not expecting it. And especially now that we're going to use is and where. For example, if we wanted to use a selector that we know is unsupported, in some browsers, but we want to progressively enhance, for example. But this error handling can work against us because we can't progressively enhance because the rule just break entirely for all the browsers. So this was addressed by change to the specification, and the spec introduced this concept of forgiving selectors, which is, or rather forgiving selector lists. So what happens with a forgiving selector list is that you have multiple selectors and maybe one or two of them are unsupported or invalid. And even though a browser may not recognize them, it would still try to match the rest of the selectors that it does understand. So the rule will still work, even in the presence of those unsupported selectors. So I wasn't able to figure out a way to do transitions for this, but yeah, so we have this example where we have a read-only attribute selector and the read-only pseudo class. Now, this example isn't perfect because the read-only pseudo class has been around for quite some time, it's been well supported for quite some time, but this is just for demonstrating the error handling of these two pseudo classes. So even without the pseudo class, if we have input read-only attribute and input read-only pseudo class, in browsers that didn't support the pseudo class, the whole rule will break. So you need to split them into two different rules, and you need to repeat this color declaration in order for the fallback rule to work. So what happens here is that in the original case, because this selector is not supported, it invalidates the whole rule. So with the new error handling, even if read-only is not supported in the browser, the read-only attribute selector will still work. And so the rule can still apply, and the color declaration can still apply to the input element. And this saves having to split the rule with an unsupported selector into two rules, therefore allowing you to really maximize the use of the benefits of is and where to reduce duplication. Yeah, so yeah, that's about the introduction to the is and where pseudo classes. Actually, let me just take a look at the chat though. Yeah, so so I wanted to give a shout out to Georgie. Thank you for staying up for me. It's not terribly late here, but I know that it's terribly late for you personally because you go to bed pretty early. So I wanted to, thank you so much for being here to support me. I know that you've had your own journey in giving tech talks as well. So yeah, you were one of my inspirations here. Oh, thank you so much. And I don't remember if Chi An is in the audience, but he helped me navigate to. I got in touch with him to get started attending Talk.CSS, and he gave me directions in a couple of the meetings. So wanted to shout him out as well, and to Hui Ting, for Annie Howley organizing Talk.CSS, to Hui Ting and Chris. Yeah, so I'm really glad that I'm able to start speaking to the both of you. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Hui Ting, when you showed the intro slide for today's meetup, right? I noticed that my title was surrounded by the octopus emoji, and I'm like, how did you know I like octopuses? Did I tell you? I don't.
Random guess.
Wow, you're very good guess. Yeah, it's my favorite animal. It's like my all-time favorite animal. Yeah, Georgie, I agree.
That's nice. If only I was this good at guessing 4D numbers, but never mind.
Yeah, and if if Eric's still around, yeah, thanks for being here as well. I'm super honored to be speaking alongside you, especially for this wind up talk, as our meetup comes to a close, and I guess I should. No, I'm not gonna do that. Try edits, no. But basically, yeah, I'm really proud that this Sheldon Ching is he's late. Yeah, so yeah, I'm really happy that this meetup has come such a long way for 5 years, and I'm glad to have been a part of half of it, And I'm really thankful for this opportunity to speak as well, especially about my favorite CSS subject. Yeah, so that's my website, my Twitter, and my Stack Overflow link. Yeah, so I have was it 2,000 answers in CSS? Yeah, that's quite a big number. But yeah, so there's a pretty good chance that you have all come across as one of my answers at some point, and
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. And I'm also sure like a lot of people have read your answers, they just don't know it was you.
yeah,
But it's okay, cause you ninja. Ninjas
Yeah.
are cool. Yeah, no, thank you for being with us, for so many years. Yeah, when Chris and I started Talk.CSS, we wanted to make it really like the opposite of intimidating. So we wanted to make it a very casual, very warm, very welcoming environment, and the fact that you felt safe enough to give a talk with us is really we are really very thankful that you chose to give your talk with us, so thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna do this for the last time. Wait, Zoom. Okay, I boot you off. I share my screen.
okay.
Lol. Okay, come where? This is a mood slide it's been mood for 1 year, so I just move on. Oh yeah, best friend meetup. Best friend meetup got just subscribe to the YouTube channel cause somebody was like set a very low bar. They're like, oh, can we get like 100 subscribers this year? Like, walao, life got no standards so just boost the numbers. FYI, got a lot of good talks on there, so it's not just for fun one. It's got value. Okay. Anyway, okay. Thank you everybody. Thank you for 5 years. Some people are turning on their videos now. Okay lah, I also copy Daniel, also shout out. Thank Zion for when we had to do the in-person thing, and then because we are cursed, Singapore CSS being the most cursed meetup in Singapore, we bombed his perfect record. Then he failed 2 recordings in a row. Ha. But anyway, thanks for not giving up on us. Then always come and record us. And Chris, you want to say closing words or not? Is he still there? Did he drop off? You want to sleep already, is it? Ed, do you want to represent him as an Australian representative?
Thanks, everyone. It's been really great. And yeah, miss you all in Singapore.
Yeah, hopefully one day we'll see you all again. Okay, I'm not going to take most of your time. As usual, we will post the videos. I think I recorded them. Anyway, then we'll share slides, and okay, I will read out the text on this screen. I say thank you. Red heart, orange heart, yellow heart, green heart, blue heart, purple heart. Know you know us. We are Singapore CSS. Anyhowly also got standard one. Okay, wash your hand, don't touch your hands, don't touch other people. Okay, thanks. Bye. Stop share. Yeah, okay. Gonna end the meeting so y'all can go and like eat dinner. Eric, thank you for being with us this whole time. I guess for you it's breakfast. I'll follow up with Daniel and Eric about the slides offline. So, okay.